Hello, book lovers. Welcome to my channel. I'm Peg, and I really have an exciting book to talk about today. But first of all, I'll tell you that I am actually fulfilling the requirements of a tag. I've been tagged, which I love, on the what's called the Guilty Reader book tag. Now, I love tags and I love challenges, but I'm unable to just run through them and answer the questions. It's been mentioned by others that I'm not real good at that. What I do like to do is take it as a challenge, find a couple questions I really like and don't mind answering, and then work it into talking about what I wanted to talk about anyway, which that's fun. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do today. And the question I'm going to start out with on this was, what was it? Oh, something about series. I'll change that a little bit. It's something about series, and I think it was like, have you ever read a series out of order? And I have to say, yes, I have. There's a 8-book series that I read terribly out of order. I didn't even maybe really realize it was a series exactly, except the same people kept coming. And more than that, I have had to wait over 25 years for the last one of the series to appear. Now, you George or our Martin fans have nothing on that, I'm sure, though it remains to see if you'll ever see your final. Anyway, okay, so I'll start out with the book itself, which was published this week. It's called A Legacy of Spies by John Le Carre. And it was published Tuesday here in the U.S., and I believe is just newly out today, September 7th, in the U.K. So we had a few days on it, actually. Now, I haven't finished it, I have to say. I'm reading it as slow as I possibly can because I'm pretty sure it will be the last. The author is 86. Anyway, but I wanted to use it as a stepping stone to talk about the rest of the series, which are wonderful. We'll go into that. Okay, first I want to give you a little background on John Le Carre. He was a teenager during World War II, lived in England, and was not able to be in the actual war, but soon after it was over, he was recruited to join the British Secret Service. Now, there was a lot of action in that camp right after the war. Spies and counter spies and all kinds of goings on, actually, throughout the whole Cold War. And John Le Carre took that as his fascinating subject. His first couple books he wrote while he was still an intelligence agent. Now, he says that the books aren't about anything that really happened, that he had a boring desk job, all this. But I do know, and he admits, that the intelligence agency had to take his books before publication and scrub them of anything that they thought that they didn't want the public to know, and that kind of really bothered them. But he kept writing, and on his third novel, which probably most people have heard of, the famous, it's called The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. It was so famous and did so well that he was able to quit his job at the British intelligence agency and just write what he wanted to, and not worry about, well, I'm sure he had to change names and change some things, but they are tremendous. The rest of the series are just, I don't know what to say. They were kind of a new breed of spy novel for those of us who like that sort of thing. The main character in most of them was George Smiley, and he appears in all of them. He's not the main character in all of them, but he's kind of the force that goes through. And I've thought about why they were so popular then and why I liked them so much. And this was during the time in the late 60s and 70s when James Bond, what's his name? James Bond. Yeah, James Bond was very popular both in books and movies, and still is. And uh, George Smiley and his cohorts in A Legacy of Spies were really the antithesis of James Bond. Now, James Bond, of course, was a slick trick and was good looking, got all the girls, solved all the mysteries, never got hurt. All this. I mean, kind of a hero type. George Smiley, on the other hand, was what you might call an anti-hero. He was not your typical spy, as we thought they were. He was kind of short and dumpy. His wife leaves him in the first book, which he kind of mourns over for the rest of the series. I mean, he was like a real person, but boy, was he smart. He was a great spy, and plays a very complex part in all these. The other thing, maybe that this was so popular, I'm not really into the spy novels previous to this, but it really had a noirish flavor, which I loved. A lot of the books, which were all on the Cold War, took place in Germany and the boundaries, the wall between East Germany and West Germany. And it was always rainy and dark, and people had trench coats on, and there was a lot of smoking too. Anyway, so he wrote 8 books in that series. The first one was in the early 60s. The last one was in 1990. At that point, there were 8 of them, and all centered on Cold War activities. And they're just fantastic. I mean, I'll go into my kudos later. Then all of a sudden, it seemed like all of a sudden to me, the Cold War was over. Now, I did not live in the country at the time. I lived in Asia, and it was hard to get a lot of current news. But it appeared that one day that we were afraid of the Soviet Union, which we called it then, and the next day the wall was coming down. The satellite countries were falling like dominoes. I mean, it just seemed to happen really quickly. Some days it might be better to be back there. Oh well, I shouldn't go into that. Okay, so there was much concern among us John Le Carre fans. What's he going to write about? He's the Cold War guy. And we weren't interested in hearing anything about it. He had written a couple other books about other places during that time, and didn't seem that great. Well, I will have to say, John Le Carre came through it like a champ. He didn't write any more about the Cold War. We never knew until now, what happened to those spies in that series, but he wrote a lot of really good books. He was able to find intrigue and spying in countries all over the world, which we now know is certainly possible. He wrote some real famous books afterwards, after this series. As I say, he's still an active writer, and some of them were made into movies. Some of the ones you might recognize that he wrote were The Tailor of Panama, The Constant Gardener, The Night Manager, and The Little Drummer Girl. I'm pretty sure several, maybe at least one of those has been made into a movie, though I'm not a movie buff, so I haven't seen it. Okay, so he was still alive and kicking, growing older. And I liked his books okay. I've probably read all of them. They're okay, but they didn't have that magic for me of the Smiley novels. Okay, so last spring, I read in the book news somewhere that John Le Carre, at 86 years old, was going to be publishing a 9th George Smiley series novel. I was just delighted. I was almost afraid to hope that it would be good, But I have spent the time reading through all his other 8 in the series, and re-enjoying those. I'd, of course, forgotten a lot and getting used to the personalities and living in that world. He's always been so good at showing the interior of a character and what the character's thinking, while at the same time showing what's going on the outside. And sometimes neither of them are what's really going on, but it's, I don't know, it's some kind of special trait I find in these. And also, they're very complex. Sometimes many different intrigues are going on at the same time. You can't tell who the good guy and the bad guy is. They're just great. Okay, so I read them all to prepare myself for this new publication, which I'm reading very slowly, but I have read up enough of it now that I know what characters are in the new one, that I can tell you what you really should read before you read this new one. That will give you immensely more history of the characters and the way, style of writing and everything. So I have written a little tip sheet down below, so you can press that arrow and look at it if you want while I'm talking about these others in the series, and showing why some of them you really should read. Okay, the first book he wrote was called For the Dead, shortly followed by The Murder of Quality. These were his first books. He'd never written or studied writing at all. They're not as good as the others, and also they were scrubbed by the intelligence agency that he worked for. They weren't about to let him get any real good secret stuff out. So they're hard. One of them, the second one, is just really kind of an English mystery rather than being a spy mystery. But I mean, they're still good, and if you really like him, you'll want to read them all too. But anyway, the first one, Call for the Dead, does introduce George Smiley, the character that the series is named for, and his early history. And as I said, it's not written real well, but you do learn to understand his personality, and also one of the events that happened in that book is referred to later. So if you're at all, I did put a question mark, but if you're all serious, I think I'd read that one too. Okay, the next one you must read. Probably his most famous work is called The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, and they've just been recently all republished in print in these wonderful Penguin series, and I treated myself to some of those. This one is actually right on the back, no less than Graham Greene has said it was the best spy story I've ever read, and it really is just full of interesting things and shows you that world, and it's just great. Even if you don't ever read anymore, you should read that one. Anyway, okay, so I have that one marked with whatever I marked it with of must read before you read this last one. Okay, and the other one that you really should read to be able to enjoy this Legacy of Spies skips down to the one called Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy. You've probably heard of these. I mean, the names are real familiar. And on the back of that, Time calls Mccrae the premier spy novelist of his time, perhaps of all time. So he's really well respected in the older spy fiction world. Okay, so also this one, these two, if you read these two, you'll know the characters if you read the new one. It's enough. But I must tell you that his best work is actually numbers 5, 6, and 7, starting with this Tinker Tailor, and I don't have the Honourable Schoolboy, but the last one in that trilogy is called Smiley's People, and this is called the Karla Trilogy. And Karla is George Smiley's nemesis on the communist side. We don't really see a lot of Karla, except in one great scene. I won't mention that. But he plays a part because we see his actions, and you know that he and George Smiley, who's head of the division back in London, are like playing a chess game with their movements of their assets and their spies. And so Karla is a big part of this, even though he's not there, literally there. Anyway, so after that, he does kind of branch out. And so really, I think if you read, of course, if you like them, read them all like I did. But that'll give you a heads up to be able to face this new one, at least knowing something. I suppose it's possible to just read it. Anyway, as I said, I'm reading it very slowly because I'm pretty sure it'll be the last one. And I'm not here to review it today. I have noticed that there's a vast difference in his writing between the first one that he wrote, the number 8 that he wrote in 1990, and this one. It's much more tight, but yet polished. It's good. You know, I'm enjoying it. I haven't read that much. Anyway, so I will be, as soon as I finish, I will be reading the reviews on it. I never do that till I've finished the book myself and made my own judgment. And there's going to be a lot of reviews, I'm sure, on it since, well, because of the history and because I think it's going to be a good book. I understand that our own Steve Donahue is going to have a review of it in the Christian Science Monitor, so that'll be interesting. Okay, guys, you might want to rush out and buy it. I'm sure the copies are going fast. Okay, bye.